Thank you for joining me on the Save My Thyroid podcast, where I help people save their thyroid and regain their health. My name is Dr. Eric Osansky, and if you have hyperthyroidism, including Graves' disease or toxic multinodular goiter, then you will especially benefit from these episodes. If you have Hashimoto's thyroiditis, you also need to save your thyroid, and therefore you'll also find many of the episodes to be valuable. You're about to listen to another Save My Thyroid Health Audit, as I will spend approximately 25 minutes chatting with someone who has a thyroid or autoimmune thyroid condition and give them actual advice to help them improve their health. In this Save My Thyroid Audit, I will speak with someone who has had the antibodies for Graves' disease and Hashimoto since 2017 and has been taking antithyroid medication on and off since then. Her name is Alexa, and two of her main health challenges include gut issues and a goiter. Just a reminder that this audit isn't exactly the same as a comprehensive consultation I do with the patient, as prior to doing an audit, I have the person fill out a brief application, and it's fine if they send a few basic blood tests, whereas with a patient consultation, I'll have them fill out a comprehensive health history and other forms, and they usually will also send a decent amount of labs for me to review. And of course, a patient consultation is a lot longer. But either way, I'm confident that you will find this conversation to be valuable. Also, if you would like to apply to do an audit with me, you could do so by visiting savemythyroid.com/audit. As usual, make sure you listen to the post-episode chat after the outro music, as I'll expand on some of the recommendations I gave to Alexa. And you could access the show notes by visiting savemythyroid.com/207. Anyway, here's my conversation with Alexa.
Welcome to the Save My Thyroid podcast, hosted by Dr. Eric Osansky. To stay up to date on the latest thyroid health-related topics, make sure to subscribe on your podcast player. And to get your free thyroid and immune health restoration action points checklist, visit SaveMyThyroidChecklist.com. The following discussion is for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease. Please do not apply any of this information without first speaking with your doctor. Now let's head to the show.
So I am excited to do another Save My Thyroid Health Audit where we're chatting with Alexa here. And Alexa, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited. You submitted your application to do this audit, diagnosed with both Graves and Hashimoto's back in 2017.
Yeah, so really, I guess I knew about the Graves. That's what I was diagnosed with. And then I came to find out later that it was also Hashimoto's as well.
All right. And that was about 8 years ago. Curious, when did you find out about me? Because I was around back then. So I don't know if you've been following me for a while. You just came across me.
Yeah, no, I was digging and digging, trying to find another option other than removing my thyroid after probably like the first few years, maybe around like 2019, 2020 is when I found you online.
Okay.
It took a while because, and I know you've mentioned before, there's not as much info about Graves. And initially, I just kind of followed along with the doctors and what they prescribed for me to do as far as like taking the medication. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm pretty healthy. Like, I'll probably be one of those people that it'll just go into remission on its own. And that didn't happen for me. So, of course, after a couple years of treatment is when they started suggesting like permanently removing my thyroid. And I'm like,
Yeah.
there's got to be something else. So,
Well, there's definitely other options, which you know now. And I'm glad you looked into other options. I'm glad you found me. So you've been on the methimazole because I know you're taking it now, and you've been on it ever since then, since 2017?
pretty much, I've had some gaps where I was doing really well. They were able to wean me off of the medication and then had to go back on it because I wasn't treating like the root cause. So there's been some periods like 4 to 6 months, maybe max, where I've been off of the medication. And then for the majority of these past 8 years, I've been on it.
Okay. Has it been a lower dose? Like what are you currently taking?
Currently taking 5 milligrams 4 days and then 10 milligrams for 3 days.
All right. So 5 milligrams, 4 days a week, 10 milligrams, 3 days a week. Also, you made some dietary changes, recently cut out gluten.
Yes.
Okay.
So I've done that a couple times as well. I've done AIP for some time. And that's probably when I was able to lower my antibodies the most. And then just kind of fall back into, I have a little bit of, whatever, this and that here and there. And then it starts to creep back up. The removing gluten, I just tried that. I think Lent, maybe not last year, but the previous year. And I saw like a change in like the way that I felt. And so I'll still do mostly gluten free like throughout the years. But then again, this time around, I started a little bit early. I started right at the beginning of March, where I've just been like straight gluten free. And I really try to be grain free majority of the time as well.
How long were you following AIP for?
I want to say close to at least 3 months, if not longer. I was doing pretty well. Like I said, with that, I think I went from 18 or so with my thyroid antibodies down to about 2 point something, 2.19, I want to say.
It's really good. It's not easy to stay on AIP, and it's not really meant to be a long-term diet. Maybe you need it to be on it a little bit longer, possibly. There could be
Yeah.
other factors as well. With the grain-free, are you avoiding grain just because of what you learned about grains, or do you feel better when you're not eating grains?
I feel better, and I've noticed that my goiter it's never been super large. I don't know if you can see it, but I feel like it goes down as well when I avoid that, particularly oats, which I was trying so hard to keep in, and that just it doesn't work for me. And then the gluten is hard. Is That's the hardest one for me, I think, to give up. But I do notice the difference.
Yeah. Okay. You're still consuming dairy?
I do still consume dairy in smaller amounts. I've also, for a while, I was not really consuming, like for years of my life, I really didn't consume much dairy just because I always felt sick after eating it. But then it's this weird trade off of, okay, well, if I'm not eating like grains and things to fill me up, then I'm eating more dairy. Maybe that's the next thing that needs to go.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's different, but usually I have people take a break from the common allergens. And you did do
Right.
this with AIP, obviously,
Right.
you avoided it, possibly consider doing it again. When was the last time you had your antibodies tested?
It's been a while because my doctor doesn't really check for them that often. I'd say it's probably been at least the last 3 times that I've been, I haven't had them done.
Okay. Did you get it tested
I'd
at
say
all
at
in
least,
2024? Or
yeah, I'd say it's been at least 6+ months.
all right. And then you put down three biggest challenges: gut issues, which you said they're improving, the shortened periods, and the goiter, which also with the grains and gluten free. So the gut issues are getting better. Also, is that with the grain free, gluten free diet too?
I believe, yes, I believe so. And actually, also, I've seen like a functional medicine doctor probably again around like 2021. And I was taking, is it betaine,
Between
HCl?
HCl?
I was
Yes.
taking that. I took the, oh, I cannot remember the name of Rifaximin, something like that, where it clears out like SIBO.
The antibiotic rifaximin?
I did, yes.
Okay.
So I took that and I felt like that actually did really well. I took the like colostrum to help heal my gut. And that actually was probably about that same time where my thyroid antibodies were going down as well. So it's probably a mixture of all of those things. Sorry, the original question.
You mentioned that you saw a naturopath, which for the betaine HCl. I guess I was talking about the gut issues, like the gut
Yeah,
issues, and you said that they were,
that's probably
and
when
that's
it was
why you
the
brought
best.
up the betaine HCl and the rifaximin. Obviously, the SIBO relates to the gut. So,
That's probably when it was the best. So
mm.
now I think that the definitely being gluten, mostly grain free, is definitely helpful. But I think that I probably need to do some of those supplements as well.
Did you test for SIBO? Did you do a SIBO blood test, or did they just go by the symptoms?
I did the breath test.
And that did show that you were positive for SIBO.
Yes,
Did you retest to confirm that it was gone? Okay, you didn't.
I did.
And any other functional medicine testing that you did back then, like stool test or saliva test, or
I did the stool test. I did not do a saliva test, but I feel like I did at least three. Maybe it was the blood. Oh, the
Dutch
blood
did
test.
blood test?
IgG,
Okay,
IgG, IgE.
like food sensitivity testing,
Food
or okay,
sensitivities.
okay,
Yes. So I did that as well. So I avoided like the top things on my list. I think it was like flax seeds, chickpeas. For the most part, I still to this day avoid those things. I don't know if I'm like if I still am sensitive to those or not. What I did find when I did AIP though was like sensitivities to other things that did not show on that list at all. Or I think that was actually how I found out like, okay, gluten didn't show up on that
Hmm.
test, which I was so happy about at the time. But then when I decided to give it up, I saw changes in the way that I felt. And so I'm like, maybe, and I know you've mentioned that before as well, like that test may not be the most accurate or the most helpful.
Yeah, and you were eating gluten at the time you did that test as well?
The sensitivities test? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Just because you need to be eating the food for it to be accurate. So,
So,
yeah, if you're gluten free for 3 months, then we would expect it to be negative. But if you were
mhm,
eating gluten and then it was negative, and yeah, it's definitely not a perfect test
mm,
because people can have false negatives, false positives, but then also there's other issues with gluten. It's not just being sensitive, but it can
right.
affect permeability of the gut, even.
Right. And I think that's what's happening with me.
It sounds like you had a lot of success focusing on gut health
Mhm,
between AIP, taking the betaine HCl, the colostrum, the
mhm.
rifaximin for the SIBO. And how do you remember how long you were on rifaximin for?
I feel like it wasn't that long, but I don't remember the exact time frame.
Okay, maybe like 30 days or something like that.
Probably.
When you had SIBO back then, do you remember were you having constipation or loose stools or?
Yes. I feel like more so, especially then, I was having more sensitivities where I would have like the diarrhea. I really haven't
Mhm.
had that at all in the more recent years. But yeah, certain things would trigger, like soy was like one of the first things I kind of noticed that would give me like the diarrhea. And so I stopped eating that a long
Mhm.
time ago. And then maybe like some gas and bloating, but I didn't think that was not normal. So it wasn't necessarily that I knew something is going on with my gut, other than, which I'll actually give you a bit of background on me too, is just I always had stomach issues like as a kid. They originally wanted me to start taking omeprazole as a kid. I think I was maybe 10, 12 years old. And I just have never been that person. Like I never wanted to take medicine for an extended amount of time. And so I would take it, but my mom is a nurse. My mom was like, okay, if you just make sure that you take it all the time,
Mhm.
then you won't
Yeah.
have these episodes of what they thought was like acid reflux. And now
Yep.
I probably had the exact opposite. So I would never take it like the way I was supposed to. And then I just eventually just got to where I would only take Pepsid as needed. And even now, it took me 20, almost 30 years to figure out like that's not the best thing to do. So yeah, so now I'm doing more of the ACV. I'd like to get back on like the betaine or something like that to see if that helps. But again, I didn't think that those things were abnormal.
Yeah, that's a big problem. A lot of people on acid blockers temporarily, even that a lot of people don't need to be on, but still it's when people are on it for months or
Yes.
years because we need stomach acid. So it's not fixing the problem. And a lot of people have low stomach acid and they're
Mhm.
on, they might have symptoms that mimic high stomach acid, like too much stomach acid, and they put on the acid blockers. But you mentioned, so now, well, you took in the past the betaine HCl, now the ACV, the apple cider vinegar, you're taking that. So it's good you know what to do now. Like, I mean, you took rifaximin, but for those who are not familiar with rifaximin, it's supposed to just focus on the small intestine. It is an antibiotic, but it's not supposed to negatively affect the gut microbiome like the large intestine where most of the bacteria are. So even that isn't as bad as taking like a broad spectrum antibiotic or again a acid blocker or PPI. Oh, and then also we probably should mention that one of the goals also is you want to have another successful pregnancy. Hey, this is Dr. Eric. And if you're looking to do everything you can to save your thyroid, in addition to listening to this podcast, there are a few different ways we can help you. First of all, I've written 3 books on thyroid health, 2 related to hyperthyroidism and 1 related to Hashimoto's. And you can get all of them on Amazon, or to learn more about them, visit savebythyroid.com/thyroid books. Second, you can also join my Graves disease and Hashimoto's healing community by visiting savemythyroid.com/thyroid group. And finally, if you want to get personal help from me, you can visit the website workwithdreric.com. Just to let you know, I only see a limited number of new patients each month, and I do require anyone interested to complete a brief online application before working with me. And now back to the show.
Yes. So after that's partially why I think this last time I kind of fell off with some of my dietary changes was I got pregnant. Then I was taking the methimazole, which is not the best. They did switch me over to PTU for
Mm-hmm.
part of it. And then I was on like a lower dose for the methimazole for the remainder of my pregnancy. I'm very thankful. My baby, she's amazing. She's perfect. So ideally, I'd like to have another successful pregnancy, ideally not on any type of medication. We don't even have to worry about that risk.
Yeah, I understand. Also, have you done any, because when someone's thinking about conceiving in the future, I talk about detoxification because you don't want to
Mm.
do that while you're pregnant. So
Right.
over the years or while you were working with the functional medicine practitioner, if they also gave recommendations to reduce your toxic burden?
No.
Okay. Gut health's very important. I mean, that's arguably even more important. I mean, everything's important. Adrenals, gut health, liver health, but you definitely want to focus on gut health. And you've had a lot of success with that. But I always have patients do things to reduce their toxic load. A lot of it is just environments, just trying to do as much through the food you eat. Try to eat organic whenever you can, and vegetables, especially like cruciferous vegetables like
Mhm.
broccoli, help to support detoxification. Try to use natural cleaners and cosmetics in the home as much as
Oh,
you
yeah.
can.
I do
Um,
that for sure.
okay. Yeah.
Mm.
Purified water and trying to avoid like tap water and water out of plastic bottles on a regular basis. I do sometimes recommend supplements like N-acetylcysteine, which helps us support glutathione production. Sometimes I'll give other recommendations, and some of it might depend on some of the testing we do. But even if you go all out from a diet perspective, and again, the products you use in your home, which it sounds like you are aware of that, and I'm
Right.
trying to use more natural products. And with gut health, getting back to that, in my book, The Hyperthyroid Healing Diet, obviously the book focuses on diet, but I have a section that goes beyond the hyperthyroid healing, beyond diet and lifestyle. I do think it might be worth going back on AIP just because you mentioned that's when you got like those antibodies dropped tremendously. And so maybe going on it for at least 30 days, if not another 2 or 3 months. And in combination with that, maybe as far as like, should you follow another SIBO protocol? I probably wouldn't just go on the Rifaximin again if you're experiencing any of those symptoms, which I know it seems like it's been better recently. But if you feel like SIBO might be an issue, you could always do another blood test and then either go back under Rifaximin if it was positive, or there's like herbal antimicrobials you can take. Yeah, I mean, there's other things like you said you did have a comprehensive stool test done also. Okay. Did that show anything significant as far as you remember?
I remember there was like fat in my stool. Can't remember anything other than that. I don't know if like there no parasites or anything
Yeah.
like that would show. I had gone to Dominican Republic like a couple of years prior and got sick, and so I'm trying to go back and trace back to see when did I start having these gut issues
I'm sorry to interrupt, but was it food poisoning when you said you got sick or?
potentially. It was not a parasite, at least linked to
Okay.
that. But yeah, it felt pretty much since I went on that trip that I had been having these kind of gut issues. And so maybe that was a trigger, or maybe it was just happenstance. I'm not sure. But there was no parasite there. So
When was that trip to the Dominican Republic?
2016.
Okay. Well, a couple of things. So, first of all, I don't do stool testing on everybody, but over the years, I've done a good amount of stool testing, and it's not perfect. You could have parasites, even though it's negative. That's one thing to keep in mind. But then also, the reason I asked about food poisoning is because a lot of cases of SIBO they found out just a number of years ago was caused by food poisoning. What
Mm.
happens? It there's an autoimmune process against what's called the migrating motor complex, which is the cleansing wave of the small intestine
Okay.
that causes the build, because you don't have that cleansing wave, that causes the buildup of bacteria. That's a possibility. I mean, so I'm thinking, yeah, probably either parasites and it was a negative stool test, or again, potentially the SIBO, especially since you were diagnosed with it and the Rifaximin helped with that. But the hope is parasites, because what the problems with the migrating motor complex, I recommend, or I mentioned that as far as I know, there's no permanent solution. Once you
Mm,
get that damage, if it's due to the food poisoning, you can't reverse it. You could treat the SIBO, and then there's what's called prokinetics that someone
mm,
could take to help, like with the motility, so the SIBO doesn't come back. But I guess that's something maybe to look into, as far as it's ultimately up to you, as far as if you want to do another in the future, whether go back to that functional medicine practitioner or go to someone else and do another SIBO test. There is a test. It's not a real popular test, but you could actually test to see if you're having antibodies against the migrating motor complex, what I was mentioning. There's actually a test Dr. Mark Pimentel developed it. I just forgot. So I could look that up and let you know about that
okay.
if you wanted, if you were interested in that. But like I said, diet and lifestyle, AIP, since you were so successful in helping lower your antibodies with that, it makes sense to go back to that. But
Yeah.
if SIBO is an issue and if it came back, and maybe it sounds like it's not really bad as far as the symptoms. So it's one of those things. And you could always try AIP first and see how you feel gut wise before spending money on the testing. If
Mm,
you if you feel great with AIP, maybe you don't need to do testing. But if you're still having some digestive symptoms, then maybe you might want to look into doing another SIBO retest and or another comprehensive stool test, just to see what's going on. And if SIBO is an issue, then again, you either Rifaximin or another approach with herbs. And like I
mhm.
said, the parasites, doing another stool test, it sounded like it didn't show that much other than the fecal fat, like fat malabsorption.
Yeah.
And
There may be other things. It's just I don't have it like fresh
yeah,
in mind.
yeah. I mean, it's very common to have some dysbiosis, which is an imbalance in the gut flora. Like you might have some things that were high or low. That's very common. It just depends on what was high or low. It
Right.
sounds like maybe nothing really significant that was red flagged
Mm,
on that test. And like I said, it's a challenge because parasites could be negative. I did an interview with Dr. Ami Kapadia on the podcast, and she spoke about another company called Para Wellness that
oh,
focuses on parasite testing. And I've had a few people do that, and
mm,
where it did pick up parasites, where something like the GI map didn't. The downside is that's all it looks at is parasites. So like if someone wants an overall look at the large intestine, I usually recommend like the GI map. But like I said, for parasites, sometimes things don't show up on the GI map or GIFX or whatever stool test someone's doing. But yeah, I would say that your next steps would be think about going back on the AIP diet for at
yeah.
least 30 to 90 days, and then maybe just do that and then see how you feel. And if you're still having symptoms, maybe look into doing some of the testing that you've done in the past, especially probably more so the SIBO test.
Sounds good.
Thank you again for doing this health audit. It was great having this conversation. Definitely feel free to keep me posted. Shoot me an email like in the future. Just let me know how things are going. And thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening. Again, hope you enjoyed this conversation and look forward to catching everyone in the next episode.
Thank you for listening to the Save My Thyroid podcast. If you haven't done so already, make sure you hit subscribe to stay up to date on the latest thyroid health-related topics. And to get your free thyroid and immune health restoration action points checklist, visit SaveMyThyroidChecklist.com. Thanks so much for tuning in.
So that was a wonderful conversation with Alexa. Really enjoy doing these Save My Thyroid health audits. So Alexa has been taking anti-thyroid medication, the methimazole, off and on since 2017, although she switched to the PTU when she was pregnant, which is pretty common, especially in the first trimester. She did get some really good results going from an 18 with her thyroid stimulating immunoglobulins from around an 18 to 2. I didn't ask her the reference range, but usually it's like 0.55. So she, again, really big drop. mainly with AIP diet and also the treatment for SIBO with the Rifaximin. That's why I was recommending to go back on AIP, maybe look into SIBO testing, although it does make sense in her situation to see maybe just with the AIP diet how her gut feels and how her antibodies look after a few months. But she hasn't tested antibodies for a while. She said at least 6 months. But betaine HCl, so she mentioned betaine HCl as well as apple cider vinegar. Currently taking apple cider vinegar to help stimulate stomach acid production. Betaine HCl is essentially stomach acid, gastric acid in a capsule. You just need to make sure if you take it with meals high in protein. And if you feel any burning sensation, some will say even a warmness, you might want to stop it. Or if you're taking, let's say, 1 or 2 capsules, let's say you're taking 2 capsules of betaine HCl and you're feeling fine, and then you introduce a third one with meals, like 3 at a time, and then you get a warm feeling, or definitely if you feel heartburn, then you would back down to 2 capsules since you didn't feel anything with the 2 capsules. And Rifaximin. So Rifaximin, I mentioned how Rifaximin, unlike most other antibiotics, it just acts in the small intestine. Now, that being said, I usually, when someone deals with SIBO, I can't prescribe Rifaximin, but even if I was able to prescribe Rifaximin, I probably would start people with the herbs. Because, I mean, Rifaximin, unlike other antibiotics, is also very expensive, many times not covered by insurance. But that's not the main reason. The reason I bring that up is sometimes people would choose antibiotics, like for H. pylori, they might choose antibiotics over an herbal approach because the antibiotics, if they have health insurance, antibiotics might be less expensive than taking supplements for a few months. But in this case, many times, in the case of SIBO, it might not be true, especially if someone's paying out of pocket for Rifaximin. But if someone does have to take Rifaximin, it's not as disruptive as other antibiotics. One thing she also mentioned on her application when she applied for the health audit is that she has short menstrual cycles. And I didn't bring that up, just focused more on the gut health. But I did chat with her a little bit after, for a few minutes after our conversation that was recorded. And so it was interesting, actually common for people with thyroid imbalances to have shorter cycles, at least with hyperthyroidism Graves, but even with Hashimoto's, it can affect the cycles too. But she is taking the methimazole, so I don't know what her current numbers are with the methimazole, but that's still a possibility. Stress can also affect the menstrual cycle. But she mentioned that going gluten-free, she's been on and off with the gluten-free diet, and her shorter menstrual cycles actually improved, like it got longer since following a gluten-free diet. So that was interesting. She mentioned acid blockers. She took acid blockers since she was 12. It sounds like on and off, like she didn't take it as the doctor prescribed, but her mom's a nurse, or her mom kind of got on her to take the acid blockers. But it's even with adults, it's just when I hear someone's been taking acid blockers for 5 to 10 years as an adult, let alone taking it as a child for decades. I mean, I didn't take acid blockers when I was younger, but I did have my fill of antibiotics. I took a decent amount of antibiotics when I was younger. Not much better, but the difference is with antibiotics, usually you take them for whatever, like a week. And then maybe when I was younger, I mean, sometimes I might take them a few times a year. I'm sure sometimes I would go a few years without them. But acid blockers, a lot of people are on those every single day for many, many years. I'd say arguably acid blockers might be worse because they also disrupt the gut microbiome and they block stomach acid production. So you're not digesting the food as well as you should. And stomach acid helps to keep bacteria and yeast in check. I'm not saying there's not a time and place for acid blockers, even maybe taking them on a longer term basis, but just unfortunately, a lot of doctors just give the person the acid blocker and never try to address the cause of the problem. So the person's taking acid blockers for many years, not because they need it, but because the doctor never bothered to look into the underlying cause of the problem. And then avoiding grains. So I mentioned gluten-free. She's been gluten-free, but also grains she mentioned. And this was also our post-conversation. She was talking about how she had some eye symptoms, like thyroid eye disease symptoms. And they actually they improved with not only gluten-free diet, but just going grain-free. So we were talking about her grain-free, and I asked her, again, maybe this was recorded, I forgot, but I asked her if she's grain-free because she's feeling better, like without grains, or just because she read maybe my information or others' information about how taking a break from grains while healing is a good idea. And she said she actually feels better with avoiding the grains. And, I've mentioned on a wellness basis, I'm not completely grain-free. I'll have some rice every now and then, some quinoa every now and then, not daily, not even weekly. Again, it depends. Sometimes maybe 1 week I might have grains a couple of times, and then I might go a few weeks without grains. I'm not completely grain-free, and I feel fine with grains, but listen to your body, really, with anything. Just wanted to mention that. Also, stress. I asked her quickly about stress after we stopped recording, and she said she thinks she handles it well, but so did I. And I mentioned that when I dealt with Graves, I thought I handled stress well until I saw my adrenals and realized I did not handle stress well. So that's all I'll touch upon here. Like I said, it was a really good conversation, and really enjoy speaking with, I enjoy interviews too, and speaking with people like you, like people listening to the podcast who are dealing with a thyroid or autoimmune thyroid condition. And so I also hope that you found this information as well as other past health audits to be valuable. And of course, I look forward to catching you in the next episode.